If you were to think of music from a James Bond movie, I bet one of four types of songs would come to your head. Something big and brassy, something sultry and seductive,
This is the end.
something like a rock ballad, or the James Bond theme. In an interview for the Music of James Bond book by John Burlingame, David Arnold says that a Bond song should be like a steel fist in a velvet glove. Bond title songs can't just be any old love song slapped in front of a film. They should have characteristics of Bond himself. Yes, romance is a feature, but it should also be seductive, dangerous, stylish, and perhaps with a sense of fun. If you've seen my soundtracks of James Bond video, you'll know that I deliberately avoided discussing the title songs in depth because I wanted to highlight the musical score within each of the films. That's not to say the title song would never come up in that discussion, as most of the films use the main title song as a theme within the film. I did suggest that the title songs deserve their own video, and now that time has come. The Bond songs have a rich history. I think more so than the films themselves, most casual filmgoers will remember the title songs first, as music has a way of transcending the genre boundaries that other aspects of films might not be able to, and appeal to the heart of the modern audience. There's lots of great songs, and others that aren't so great. Now, before we get started with the list, there's a little bit of housework I have to do up front. I want to employ a similar criteria to selecting these songs that other channels may have used. It should be the main lyrical piece of the film, so no James Bond theme to represent Dr. No, or the opening title song for Majesties. In their place, we'll substitute Underneath the Mango Tree and We Have All the Time in the World. Also, this video will be the first for the channel in a key way. I've decided to do this as a tier list rather than traditional ranking. I'll definitely point out which song is my favorite and least favorite by the end, but music often hits me differently at different points in my life. And so after about a month or two of working on this video with countless iterations of the list, I've decided that no ranking of the songs would be true for me for more than about a week. In the pursuit of being a satisfying effort for me, I've chosen this format, though this will not necessarily be the style going forward for future videos. Alright, enough dawdling, let's get to it.
No solace in a kiss, no comfort in a sigh, no good about goodbye. The look of love is in.
I tend to think of The Look of Love as being an effort from another camp than the other entries, as it has such a life of its own beyond the film. This is probably the most recognizable song that people don't know is attached to a Bond film. But so it is, and to the spoof no less. Casino Royale from 1967 has a lot of problems that hinder most people from enjoying it on the level I think it's meant to be enjoyed on, but the music is not one of those issues. The late Burt Bacharach turns in an amazing score here. It's completely wrong for a proper Bond film, but it's amazing on its own, which is part of the reason I didn't feel right to include it in the Bond soundtracks video. The Look of Love is part of that package, becoming the first Bond song to be nominated for an Oscar. Dusty Springfield would have been a fine choice to sing a song for the main series, but The Look of Love is a whole separate genre apart from even the most seductive love ballads of the Eon films. It's a jazzy, soft meditation on love, which is something I don't see going in front of any of the other films. It's a very soft tune that lacks several of the elements that I think proper Bond songs should have. It's fantastic, but since I have such a hard time comparing it with the other songs, I'm giving it this special slot of runner-up. If I did include it, it might be in the upper half of the ranking, but who knows?
So many nights like this.
oh my goodness, this song hurts my ears with its first chords. Unlike a lot of the other songs, Never Say Never Again feels horribly dated to me, with its 80s synth and electric guitar. It kind of feels like the B-side material of a C-list artist's debut album. I think beyond the orchestration and the lyrics, the biggest problem with the song is the juxtaposition it creates when placed in front of the opening scene. It doesn't fit the excitement we should feel about either the scene itself within the story, or the prospect of Sean Connery's return. It never feels like it progresses to someplace musically that's very interesting, and so it just plods along without anything noteworthy to contribute. It's my least favorite of any of the Bond songs, and it feels like a bit of an endurance test for me to listen to the whole thing. If you can derive joy from the song, then great. But for me, whenever I hear the first note of this song, it becomes a strong argument in of itself to switch the channel to something else. A lot of songs are so aggressively of their time, and that can often be a problem. I just dinged Never Say Never Again for that sin. But for me, there's no Bond song that more exemplifies this than Madonna's Die Another Day. I feel like this is a song that only could have come from the early 2000s, and it employs a lot of the trends that I'm so happy to have seen gone from modern music. Constant in-your-face techno, repetitive symphonic samples, out-of-place lyrics that make no sense, and little melodic difference or progression throughout the song that would make it interesting to listen to. It's not nearly as unlistenable as you might be led to believe. I actually think it's one of the more tolerable examples from the early 2000s techno-pop songs. There are times where I can sit through it just fine, but Die Another Day is mostly a relic of an era that I am so glad we have passed. Doing a duet for a Bond song is a fantastic idea, and I'd love to hear another one in the future, because I'd hate to think that the producers wasted their one chance on it with Another Way to Die. Jack White and Alicia Keys are an odd pair, and both of their higher vocal registers make for an uneasy listening combination for me. I remember this song was included as DLC for Guitar Hero World Tour, and the animation of the band members had a female vocalist singing Jack White's bits, which is really funny to me. There are some solid ideas here, mostly with some of the lyrics, but this is a misfire for me. The specific sound profile of the guitar is one of my least favorite in the series. I also think that beyond some nicely worded lyrics, the actual subject of the song is a really shallow one. Listing off how everyone and everything you could care about is just another way of dying, either physically or emotionally, ironically doesn't really make for a rich listening experience. I wouldn't go so far as Calvin Dyson said in claiming this to be one of the worst things in the history of recorded sound. I mean, as a sound designer, I've heard some pretty crazy things come through a microphone. But this is definitely not a song I ever really select to listen to on my iPod while I'm driving around. Even if you didn't know the song was done at the last minute, I wonder if you're like me and can feel that fact permeate the composition. The first major vocal theme to be associated with a Bond film, together with Jump Up, Underneath the Mango Tree, is a lovely little ballad that perfectly matches the Jamaican island image. It's got such relaxed feeling that you might imagine you're on a beach somewhere and on vacation. It's one of the songs I'm actually most likely to hum to when I'm doing house chores. Unfortunately, because of that more relaxed and different feeling than a lot of the other songs, it's kind of more like background music for a hotel lobby, and I just can't get as excited about it over a lot of the other songs. Now, it's got some nice moments within the film itself, most notably as the prelude to the cold kill with Professor Dent, and with Ursula Andress coming out of the water in the bikini. It's a pleasant enough song that I listen to occasionally, but I would be surprised if this is one of the general public's most favorite Bond songs.
Underneath the mango tree.
When I was young and just getting into Bond, I thought of From Russia with Love as a knockoff Frank Sinatra song. Matt Monroe sings this one well enough, but especially as I grow older, I'm kind of bugged by the fact that I think it works far better as an instrumental. The opening titles with it are just powerful, and the vocal version feels like a soft, waltzy ballad, which sort of makes sense to play it over the credits, but it's not a song that captures my attention much. I've always been intrigued by the garble that shows up in some recordings partway through the song, which I've heard a few different stories about, and in a weird way, it endears this song more to me than some of the others. Like a lot of songs on this list, From Russia with Love is a fun tune to sing around the house while you're doing chores, but I rarely go for the vocal version over the instrumental, and so that's why it shows up in this tier.
For a moment, but oh.
Nancy Sinatra's You Only Live Twice is an enigmatic and beautiful song, accompanied with thoughtful lyrics and fun Japanese flourishes. The lyrics especially seem to pull you into a thoughtful trance a lot of the time, which makes it a refreshing change amongst the catalog if you listen to it on shuffle. It might be because it's a more muted composition and more of an intellectual exercise that I just never really find myself reaching to listen to this one specifically. I should like it a lot more because it is a song that beckons for closer examination, but its placement on this list might just be because there are so many other ones I'd rather reach for. I'm sort of fascinated by the fact that apparently Nancy was so nervous about this song that her performance in the final mixed version that we have now is apparently a combination of 25 different takes. Considering that, and knowing the amount of work that goes into editing and mixing magnetic tape, I'm far more impressed with the mixing engineer's efforts to get something cohesive here. You Only Live Twice is a fine song, it's just never one that's gelled with me like so many of the others. Possibly one of the laziest Bond songs, The Man with the Golden Gun is such an odd duck when you listen to it. Much like Goldfinger and Thunderball, it's ostensibly a song about the villain, and I should love that fact given the actual villain for the film. However, the lyrics are more than a little on the nose, and then the film itself proceeds to double down on this for the audience, just in case the innuendo was too subtle that the Golden Gun is a representation of something else I can't talk about here on this channel. All that said, the upbeat nature of this song is infectious, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't bop my head along with it. I do like the song in its instrumental romantic version and its action version that is played occasionally throughout the score. But much like I alluded to when I discussed that soundtrack, it means that the song dominates much of the thematic material for the film, that there doesn't seem to be any energy or creativity left over to make anything else interesting. And so maybe I resent the song in a low-key way for that? Regardless, The Man with the Golden Gun feels a bit to me like the drunk party crasher of Bond songs. I laugh and have a good time when it's around, but I'm a bit embarrassed for it in hindsight. Moonraker is best described to me as a song that's trying to recapture the magic again from earlier entries in the series. It's a love ballad, it has acrobatics in the images for the title sequence, and it even brings back Shirley Bassey for a third time. I don't truly have anything strong to condemn the song. It's a competent enough effort, nobody has the Bond sound for female vocals quite like Bassey does, and it's a fine enough tune that's used throughout the film. Yet it lands at this tier because, much like You Only Live Twice, there are so many other songs I'd rather listen to over this one. This is also an example of one of the Bond songs where the lyrics don't make much sense when you actually pay attention to them. I'm not really slighting it for the incomprehensible nature of the lyrics, as you'll see another song on this list that has some pretty incomprehensible lyrics too that's much higher, but I feel like the best songs marry both the music and the lyrics together in one fantastic package. Moonraker scores just high enough on the music side, hence why I don't hate this one, but it ultimately just fades into the background as a pleasant occasional listen, so it's nowhere near a standout for me. All Time High is a song that's a lot like Moonraker for me. I could almost copy-paste my description of the music from that one into this entry. If I was doing a traditional ranking list, this would go above Moonraker because it's got some of the best lyrics of the series. All I wanted was a sweet distraction for an hour or two. Funny how it always goes with love: when you don't look, you find, and let the flight begin. It's paired with one of the weakest title sequences, and after nearly 7 years of constant love ballads like Nobody Does It Better and For Your Eyes Only, it just can't quite muster enough unique flavor about it to make it as interesting as those efforts. John Barry makes great use of this song throughout the score as a background tune to the romantic scenes, and when paired with Rogers and Maud's chemistry, it helps to elevate some of the more routine scenes of the film. All Time High is a competent enough effort that makes for a nice addition to the roster. License to Kill is unfortunately one of my least favorite tunes in the series, and that's probably more because of some of the factors around it than the song itself. I don't think the song matches the film really at all in tone or lyrics. Some of the synthesizers sound a bit cheap to me. It's far too long of a song, and once I figured out that it starts out with the same chords as Goldfinger, it sort of hurt my appreciation for it. Yet, it's Gladys Knight's performance that saves this song. It's very powerful, and there are some bits that give me goosebumps. I was saddened that the series decided to revert back to a love ballad after enjoying the couple of rock tunes from the past couple of films. It honestly just feels more like a generic 80s love song, though with a little peppering of the Bond element. It's a weird song in the catalog, as I don't really re-listen to it much due to the things that I don't like about it, and yet when I'm actually listening to it, I find myself grooving along with it. License to Kill just makes it into the tier of fine to good songs for me, though I'd hate to speculate where it would be if we had a different singer than Gladys Knight here. A powerful opening to an incredibly memorable song. Shirley Bassey helps to propel Goldfinger into the stratosphere for the general public. Whenever someone is asked to sing a Bond song, there's a good chance this one will come up, although probably more so with older audiences these days. Having the song based around a villain is a fun concept, and Bassey does a great job of adding her own unique performance flourishes to the tune. I'm particularly enamored by the end of the song, which plays the 4-note progression of the Bond theme, which weirdly makes it more menacing. I guess my main issue with the song is the orchestration. It just has so much brass. The horn strikes can be a bit much on my ears if I'm not expecting it. It might be enough to knock the song down in a few places, but it's made up for by a lot of the orchestration surrounding those brassy bits. It can't be denied that Goldfinger is a titan of a Bond song for audiences, and yeah, I like it too.
Knows when he's kissed her. It's the kiss.
A very sentimental song, We Have All the Time in the World, is a beautiful accompaniment to Bond and Tracy's romance. It's definitely got a long-lasting legacy of its own. It's been referenced in the series in both For Your Eyes Only and No Time to Die, the latter going so far as to include the song in its end credits. It was the last record that Louis Armstrong ever did, and it saddened me to learn that he's not the one playing the muted trumpet. Yet his beautiful raspy voice makes this one tug at the heartstrings a bit. I also like that the song isn't afraid to let itself play without vocals. The melody's composition itself is a big reason why the song is an emotional one for me, and it's used wonderfully throughout the film as a soft instrumental to play across many of the important beats of the relationship. I have a hard time thinking of this song outside of the film, which may be part of why I have mixed feelings about its usage in No Time to Die. Regardless, We Have All the Time in the World is a solid entry to the Bond discography, and I'm grateful that Louis had the opportunity to add his voice to one of the best film series.
We have all the time.
The beginning of the love ballads for Roger Moore's era, Nobody Does It Better, has a great beginning, and I love that phrase. The first song to be explicitly about Bond in the series, I love how it serves as a tribute to him. After Sean Connery's departure, the series seemed to be slowly dying in the mind of the public, and it seemed like it would probably end at some point soon. With the great opening pre-title sequence and this song's lyrics, the film seems to be reaffirming that the series is back on the right track, and that Bond was going to be fine moving forward into the 1980s. I'm sort of sick of this song being used for a lot of Bond montages, but that's kind of beside the point. It's a lovely song that never feels sappy, and Carly Simon has a great vocal style to match it. It's also one of the songs where I can't think about it without thinking of the title sequence it plays over. Spy has such a wonderful sequence with great imagery, like using Bond as a character in the visuals, the women doing acrobatics over the pistols, and the image of Bond pushing the soldiers over. I've just always kind of had the same opinions about it that most other fans do. It's an iconic Bond song that thankfully appears in one of the best films.
Does it quite the way you do?
Aha's The Living Daylights feels like a midpoint musically between Duran Duran and Nancy Sinatra for me. It's more ponderous than a lot of the songs, but it has a more exciting feel to it. My favorite part of the song isn't actually used in the film, but it is included on most of the albums, which is a musical interlude in between the last two choruses. Something about this part reminds me a lot more of the human side of Bond, which is something that's emphasized in the film. I think this was a conscious effort on the filmmaker's part in order to help distinguish the newcomer Timothy Dalton from the series' mainstay Roger Moore. It was probably a coincidence then that the band came up with this idea, as history says the collaboration didn't go very well. John Barry had a horrible time with this band while recording the song. I'm sorry to hear that that's the case, but I think both were able to come together to create something really, really unique. And Barry's less than stellar experience certainly didn't mar his creativity in using the tune throughout the score. As I've said in the soundtrack's ranking video, The Living Daylights is my favorite of the Bond scores because there's never a dull moment in the film musically, and the title song is responsible for helping to provide some of those great moments. After the slight misstep that was License to Kill, Goldeneye gets us back on track, which is a sentence that's probably true for a lot of people in more ways than one. The song goes for a more seductive feel, which is something I felt had been missing from the series since Diamonds Are Forever. The late Tina Turner belts out the song in a similar way to Gladys Knight, but with a much darker color that feels more appropriate for the first post-Cold War Bond film. When this song is paired with the title sequence from this film, it helps to date the 1980s Maurice Binder efforts even more than they already are, and it makes such a statement from Daniel Kleinman. One of the biggest crimes of this film's soundtrack, in my mind, is that the song isn't used anywhere in the film, as it's an excellent tonal thesis for what is essentially a soft reboot of the series. It's specifically the bass that gets me grooving. I have a thing for title songs to harken back to the Bond theme, and this is one of the subtler examples. I also love the interludes when Tina sings, "You'll Never Know How I Watched You from the Shadows as a Child." There's just something that resonates with me so much with these bits. which make those sections of the song some of my favorites in any song from the Bond discography.
Time is not on your side.
So this is the song that jumped around the most when I was putting together this list. As I understand it, Writings on the Wall is one of the most derided songs within the fandom. So here's my hot take for this video. Not only do I love this song, I like it a lot better than Radiohead's Rejected theme, which I know sounds blasphemous, but I've listened to that song several times over the years and it's never clicked for me, despite my liking some of the band's other material. I think Smith's vocals make for an intriguing matchup with a song that I just love as a melodic composition. Given that Craig is a more somber and moodier character, this honestly feels like an appropriate matchup. I think my favorite bit is the build-up into the final chorus with the horns belting out over the strings. I could understand how Smith's vocals are too whiny for some people, and I appreciate this might not be a song to everyone's tastes, but it really works for me. Spectre is one of my least favorite films in the series. But this song, when paired with a really solid title sequence, is one of my biggest highlights from the film. It's really easy to think of Thunderball as Goldfinger done over again, and given that it was a last-minute composition and recording, it's understandable that this is what the producers went with. Yet, I find the darker nature of the melody and Tom Jones' performance to make it a bit more up my alley than Bassie's Goldfinger. It also uses the Bond theme a lot like Goldfinger, though a different section, and I think that works a bit better here, given that the lyrics are describing Largo, who is a darker side of Bond character. Sometimes, I have to wonder if the lyrics could also be describing Bond himself, giving the song a double meaning, which makes it even more intriguing. The idea about building a song around Bond must have been an idea that was up in the air at that point, as one of the Rejected themes before this was Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which, as I understand it, was a moniker for Bond in the press at that time. Regardless, Thunderball is an incredibly powerful opening song for the film, and when coupled with that title sequence, it's definitely a favorite of mine.
Who takes all?
When you were young and your heart was an open book.
Another perennial favorite of pop culture, Paul McCartney's Live and Let Die is such an awesome tune that starts off the film in a very energetic way. The song by itself is an easy recommendation to add to a party playlist. The switch from something very soft into something quite harsh musically, when paired with the striking image of the flaming skull, is a moment that's seared into my brain from the first time I saw this film. And while I don't love everything about that title sequence, that bit alone is one of my favorite moments from all of Maurice Binder's work, and it doesn't work without this song. I had a teacher in grad school who was a huge fan of the Beatles and the four members' solo career afterwards, and he once told me that Live and Let Die was the best thing that McCartney made after the Beatles. Admittingly, I'm not as familiar with Paul's solo work as I am with the Beatles as a whole, but I'd be surprised if many people disagreed with that thought. Almost the flip of Never Say Never Again in a lot of ways for me, it's a great way to open the film and gets me pumped to rewatch one of Roger Moore's best entries. What an intro! I could almost forgive the incomprehensible nature of the lyrics because A View to a Kill has such energy about it and is one of the best tunes of the series. Seriously though, I can't make heads or tails of the lyrics, and yet they make for an unforgettable piece when paired on top of that melody. After so many love ballads for Roger Moore, Nobody Does It Better, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, All Time High, this gets the film off to the right start. The Bond films had started to feel a little lethargic and routine by this point, and while the film A View to a Kill does become an example of this trend by the end, I'm lulled into a trance during the main title sequence that I sometimes wonder if this is maybe an entry that I've unfairly looked over in the past. Plus, I want to hold out hope. Roger carried the series through some of its darkest hours, and he deserves a banger of a film to go out on. At the very least, A View to a Kill offers us one of the best villains of the series and one of the best songs to accompany an actor for his final curtain call. So even if the rest of the film can't match these standout elements, at least it gave us that.
That fatal kiss is all we need. Dance.
Much like Writings on the Wall, Tomorrow Never Dies gets a bad rap from the fandom, and I wonder if it's for the same reason. There's an alternative song out there that the general public likes more. The more country style of Sheryl Crow's past offerings seems like she would be an odd fit for the series, and yet the song has a great laid-back style that helps to make this one of my most listened to songs of the series. The surf guitar makes for a great pairing with Crow's voice. It's also got a great opener and some standout lyrics, like "It's Murder on Our Love Affair." I've seen the title sequence paired with Katie Lang's song, and while I would have loved for that song to open the film, I think the title sequence works a lot better with Crow's song. Tomorrow Never Dies is unfortunately a victim of the film's production history. Lots of things got changed up at the last minute, including this song, and it's a miracle we have as cohesive and good of a film as we currently do. Had Tomorrow Never Dies been the only song to accompany the film, I don't think I would have complained about it much. It's just so easy to overlook because there's a bigger and better party going on over at the end credits. The World Is Not Enough is a fantastic example of a lot of the elements that I think of when I imagine the elusive, perfect Bond song. Its melody is pretty dark in a very sexy kind of way. Shirley Manson adapts her voice appropriately to match the energy of the song throughout. The lyrics have great thematic resonance with the film's themes and story, and the energy is just infectious. Before I purchased the 2002 Best of Bond compilation CD, which had all of the title songs up to that point, I had a MIDI version of these songs on a CD, and The World Is Not Enough was just a song that I listened to ad nauseum. I think it's one of the simpler songs in terms of structure. It has a very traditional rock standard of verse, chorus, interlude, chorus, and yet it helps to prove why that structure has stuck around so long. The chorus just sticks with you, which is probably the best part of the song. Coupled with the oil silhouettes of women in the titles, it's a great match. Thus, The World Is Not Enough continues Brosnan's film's winning streak of title songs up to this point. No Time to Die was the song where we had the most time to live with it before we finally got to see it within the film. It was actually kind of surreal to see the titles that it accompanies, as I had almost 18 months to digest this song. I was introduced to Eilish the summer before this song came out, and so I was interested to see what she delivered, and it's pretty on point for her. It's the quietest and most lounge-like of the songs in the series, but the tender performance matches the sadness in the breakup that we see in the opening scene. Given that Bond closes himself off emotionally again after Madeline seemingly betrays him like Vesper, I love that this is the song that helps us to spend some time internalizing that feeling so we can be in the same emotional place as Bond for the rest of the story. It's one of the best marriages between film and song in the series. I love that it slowly gets louder and louder towards its climax before having a soft coda that ends with the final chord of the Bond theme, almost like it's an uneasy finish and we're not quite sure where we're going from here. No Time to Die is another really solid entry, and with this final song from Craig's tenure, it means that Craig is the actor with the best hit ratio of title songs for me.
That I've fallen for a lie.
Mysterious and haunting, Shirley Bassey's second Bond outing is my favorite of her three efforts. My first memory of this song was from the MIDI CD that I talked about with The World Is Not Enough. And even on cheap electronic instruments, the opening just felt like it was pulling me into this realm of mystery, and I became fascinated with the song. Bassey deliberately goes for a different kind of performance than Goldfinger, which somehow mixes fun and cynical heartbreak. The vocals match the music so well that I feel like the song's a musical version of the hypnosis spiral. It just keeps going and going in a cycle that pulls me in further and further, and the song's claws just won't let me go. I've listened to the tune countless times, and it's one of the few Bond songs that I've actually gone to the effort of making my own cover of. And I think that deep dive and examination of the song helped me to appreciate it all the more. I often see the film Diamonds Are Forever ranking towards the bottom of people's list of Bond films, but I'd be surprised if everybody felt the same way about this song.
For when love's gone.
On paper, there's not a lot of difference between For Your Eyes Only and the other love ballads of the series. Yet, I can't listen to the song without somewhat tearing up. It's a beautiful song that doesn't rely on lots of instruments or other things to obfuscate it. The background is more of an atmospheric bed that allows the vocals to carry the tune. And there's something about Sheena Easton's performance that just strikes a resounding chord within my soul. It's sincere and heartbreaking and full of emotional comfort all rolled into one package. The already excellent soundtrack for the film by Bill Conti is just elevated even more by having this song to work with, and I love its presence throughout. There are a number of Bond films that just let their opening title songs open the film and then rarely use it as a main theme throughout, like Goldeneye, Die Another Day, and Skyfall. But I'm always more impressed by the scores that find ways to bring the title songs back into the audience's attention. I think the song gets even more of a boost by coming after a sequence where Bond gets revenge on Blofeld for Tracy, and that reminder of Bond's more emotional side right before the titles, I guess, has me in a prime state to be triggered by the song. If I put my objective hat on, I'm not sure if this is really one of the best songs in the series, but it's the one I'm least likely to skip through when I'm listening to Bond songs, and it's one that's near and dear to me. It was certainly worthy of the Oscar nomination. Growing up in Washington State, I had certainly listened to both Soundgarden and Audioslave at various points, and so I knew about Chris Cornell, and when he was announced as the singer for the next Bond song, I knew what the vocal performance was going to be like. But much like A View to a Kill, the opening chords just jolts you awake and helps to erase any preconceptions you may have had about the song, and then goes one better by working as the best tonal thesis for the character in the series. As a consequence, it has the best lyrics in the series for me, as they perfectly crystallize in the words Bond's youthful arrogance and yet the almost contrasting world-weariness. I applaud David Arnold for collaborating with Cornell to come up with a song that could serve as a thematic replacement for the Bond theme in this adventure, as it has all of the elements of a classic Bond song from the past, as well as having the energy to make this a unique color in the palette of Bond songs. I've heard a couple of different mixed versions of this song that have been released to the public. I prefer the more orchestral heavy version that's featured in the film, but the simpler rock band version that's on a lot of albums still preserves all the most crucial elements of the song that helps to put it in this tier of near perfection for me. A wonderful return to form after Another Way to Die, Adele's Skyfall feels like it's trying to distill everything I've loved about previous Bond songs into one package. Funnily enough, that meant that I didn't have a big reaction when I listened to it for the first time. I just sort of thought, yeah, this sounds like a traditional Bond song. However, I think that's sort of the point. It's one that has broken into the public consciousness of what a Bond song should sound like, much like Goldfinger or Live and Let Die. I could just start humming this at work and people will know what I'm singing. Adele does such a great job of channeling past singers like Sheena Easton, Shirley Bassey, and Shirley Manson in her performance, and the tune makes for another dark, ponderous listen. I think the film rode for a bit on the goodwill of the song, as I've come across a number of people who discovered the film after its theatrical release by listening to the song and falling in love with it. It also helps that Skyfall is a really solid Bond film that plays well with casual audiences, but the song itself is worthy of all the accolades it has. Okay, now that you have the lineup of the 4 contenders for the best song in the series, I hope you'll understand that this is a really close race for me. Since I can't have a 4-way tie, the trophy's gotta go to You Know My Name. Diamonds would be the close runner-up, followed by For Your Eyes Only and then Skyfall. Look, I'm not trying to be predictable here. Not everything from Casino Royale is my favorite thing in the Bond series, but I'm calling it like I hear it this time. You Know My Name is such a powerhouse of a song that couldn't possibly be paired with any other film, and does a great job of priming us for the adventure. Again, this is an incredibly close contest, as Diamonds Are Forever is the best of the songs for the more classic incarnations of Bond, and Shirley Bassey's vocals are hard to beat. For my money, I think we've been really spoiled by some great opening songs in the last decade or so. I know that most of the Craig songs don't land with the older crowd, and I get that. Bond themes have adapted to the times, and while that makes the songs undoubtedly products of their own times for better or for worse, I think most of the songs have a timeless quality to them, and I can be as entertained by songs like The Living Daylights and Live and Let Die now as when I heard them for the first time back in the mid-2000s. John Barry once said, "I'm sure in 1,000 years' time they'll be playing that stuff." He was probably talking about the soundtracks themselves, but I think that statement equally applies to the title songs. As long as James Bond remains popular, I guarantee you the well won't be dry of great efforts by contemporary artists to come.